Hi, and welcome to the Ready for Love podcast with Auret, the dating and relationship advice show dedicated to helping you create a single life you love, date with confidence and ease, and ultimately attract the love of your life. Thank you for listening.
Hello there, this is Auret, dating and relationship coach, your host, and welcome to another episode of the Ready for Love podcast. I'm so thrilled that you've joined me today, so thank you so much for being here. In today's episode, we're going to talk about something I think we all come across in our relationship lives at some point or another, and that is our own habits and patterns and the way we do things, respond to triggers, the choices we make, the way we communicate, the way we deal with conflict, and so on. And often these habits and patterns can be unhelpful as a minimum, and all the way across the spectrum, they can actually become really toxic and damaging and destructive, not just to ourselves, but the people in our lives, especially those closest to us. So discovering and finding different ways of dealing with these sorts of habits and patterns is always something that come up in my coaching practice with my clients at some point. And it's also something that I personally have to be very aware of, not just in my own marriage, but also in my relationships with my family and colleagues, and just in general life. It's always something to be really aware of. So it's so easy to fall into a certain way of arguing or dealing with issues that can actually hurt you, rather than finding different or more constructive ways of dealing with it. So to talk us through all of this today, I've invited a very special guest to talk to us about how we can change our unhelpful or destructive relationship habits and patterns. So let me introduce you to Madeleine Mason, psychologist and director of dating and relationship expert company PassionSmiths. So if I just tell you a little bit more about Madeleine, she is one of the best dating coaches in the world, picking up third place at the International iDate Awards in 2016. And her specialism is in cognitive behavioral therapy-based coaching, and she works with both singles and couples who need help with their love lives. Alongside her coaching, Madeleine is also Psychologist magazine's in-house dating expert for their Life Labs blogging platform, and she's seen regularly in the press. Furthermore, she is founding member of the UK-based Dating Industry Professionals Network, member of the British Psychological Society, and currently undertaking a part-time doctorate in counselling psychology. So Madeleine and her team at PassionSmiths offer private face-to-face and Skype sessions for singles and couples to help them with their love lives, and we'll hear a little bit more about that later on in the episode. So, but for now, let me welcome Madeleine. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you very much.
Lovely to have you here. So, today's episode, I think, really is something we can all relate to, and I thought we could maybe start off, if I can ask you, how, if we think about unhelpful patterns or habits, how would you define that? How would we actually know that's something that's happening to us?
Well, that's a very good question. Something that's unhelpful will come across as a sticking point in your life. So if you seem to come across an experience that manifests itself in a way that somehow hinders your life or going forward with a sense of progress, or that you sort of feel that you hit a frustration and it seems to be in a similar context as the last time. So you're sort of thinking, it's every time that I do this happens. Every time I'm at a job interview, I can't really, there's sticking points. And then you might be thinking, well, there's something unhelpful going on here because I'm not getting to where I want to go.
Okay. Well, that's a good way of looking at it. So, what are some of the ways that we can recognize it in our own lives, especially when it comes to dating and relationships? How are some of the ways these things can show up for us?
So typically I'd say within the dating space, that the clients that I see, they will say things like, I can never get a first date, or I can never get a second date, or I struggle meeting people. I seem to keep meeting the same type of person, or I've been on a series of really bad dates. Is there something wrong with me? What's going on here? There seems to be something that's not really working for me, and I can't figure out what it is. In relationships, it's things like, I don't seem to be able to connect. We fight a lot. There's some things that are making the relationship not run as smoothly as I'd like it to be, and I can't figure out what it is. So sometimes you might not even realize what the pattern is. You just know that there is something wrong, but there is a pattern.
Mm. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the markers that we can look out for? So you talked about a sticking point and
Mm-hmm.
something repetitive and
Mm-hmm.
something that you don't feel good about. Are there other
Yep.
things that we can look out for to recognize this?
In terms of patterns?
Yeah.
I suppose things like feedback from your friends and family. They might say you're always this way, or you're always doing something in particular. I'm a bit wary of markers from friends because you don't know how much of their own agenda is being driven. Mm-hmm. So let's say, aren't you married yet? Don't you have your children yet? Or whatever it might come from their own insecurities. But I think mainly it comes from your own sense of, you would need a certain amount of awareness, I'd say, in order to want to go there, if that makes sense. So you might find yourself complaining about something and it's everybody else's fault, and it's very difficult to take ownership of the pattern.
Okay. So if we think about just the process that we would go through, you just said something about awareness. Mm-hmm. Because that sounds like a quite important, important point, right?
Yeah. So the thing, and this is where we, as dating coaches and psychologists in general, this is where we come into the picture. Is that as most people know, there's a lot of subconscious stuff going on. We will do things at a top level that might sound plausible. For example, I'm too busy to date. I've got so much work going on. I don't know when I'm going to get time for this. What am I going to do? I had this client that said that to me once, and I said to her, imagine if you had all the time in the world. What would it look like? What would your life then look like? And she looked at me and she sort of said, well, I still wouldn't date. So even at the top level, mm-hmm. being busy, not having time to date, it wasn't about the time. It was about something deeper than that. And that's where the awareness piece comes in, that we have to understand that the way of dealing with unhelpful patterns requires us to sit down and have a level of introspection. So there's something called Johari's window, mm-hmm. which is basically what people can know about you and what people cannot know about you. It's almost like a 2x2 matrix. So if you imagine on the one axis, there's you and there's other people, what they can see and what you can't see. So you'll have the one that is what everybody can see. So something that's known to yourself and known to others. So for example, everybody knows I've got dark hair. It's known to me, it's known to you. So it's sort of open to everyone. Then there's the bit where you know something about yourself, but others don't know. So that's a hidden space. There's maybe some secrets or some things about yourself that you're not prepared to share with everyone. Then you've got the area where there's stuff that you know about that's known to others but is not known to yourself. So you might be doing something in a particular way that you're not aware of, but other people are aware of, and that's your blind spot. So this is when I say that when you hear from feedback from your friends and family, for example, and they say something in particular, they might be spotting something that you are unaware of yourself. And this is where, self-development courses come into play. Or you get filmed in particular team projects and that sort of thing, and get feedback in terms of seeing parts of yourself that you are unaware of, but everybody else can see.
Right.
And then the last bit, which is the most important, I think, in this sort of work, is the area about yourself that you don't know about yourself, but other people don't know either. And to the degree that you're able to get hold of that part of yourself, then you are in a better position to make better choices. So your unhelpful patterns might fall in your blind spot or in this unknown area.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I'm especially interested in the fourth one that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So these deep-rooted issues, that's mostly subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
What are the most common, issues that you come across for people, and where do they come from?
That's a very good question, and it's difficult to answer in just sort of one word. I think so we grow up in an idiosyncratic world. What that means is that each individual has a particular set of experiences that are particular to them, and we will interpret them in a particular way. And with that, alongside with how the environment and the messages that we get from our peers, our family, and our friends, we will create almost a map of the world, of how we see the world. And it doesn't necessarily reflect reality. You might have been bullied at school. That will reflect on how you then perceive other people. You will create strategies that will help you defend yourself, for example, or survive in whatever relationship context that you find yourself in. Now, some places or some people grow up in toxic environments, others not so toxic. But either way, there's still an element of having to manage yourself as you grow up. In that process, you will create what we called assumptions about the world. We'll have core beliefs and we'll have schemas. So these are sort of sound bites. The core beliefs are sound bites about what we think about the world and each other. Our assumptions then are informed going forward about how we operate in the world. I hope I haven't lost you here.
No, I'm just totally listening. Okay. I don't want to interrupt you.
Okay.
Please keep going.
What happens then is, as children, we will create strategies to basically survive, because we want to be, it's human nature to want to belong. And in that process, we might find things that were helpful once upon a time going into adulthood being very unhelpful. So one way that you might have dealt with, saying, being in a bullying environment will now be overcompensated in a way going forward and when you grow up. Mm-hmm. Now, this is all unconscious. You're not sitting down thinking, well, this is my strategy to deal with being bullied, for example, or whatever it might be, not being the brightest in the class, or whatever scenarios that you might find yourself. It doesn't have to be as extreme as being bullied. It could be, for example, you're in a very academic family, you grow up and everybody's very academic, but you aren't. And what are the messages do you get from, is it an unsupportive academic family? They're not understanding why you're not as equally academic, and what kind of messages do you then create for yourself around that, and how do you then manage that going forward? Yeah. So you're building up a repertoire of assumptions and beliefs about the world and how it operates. And they are not always helpful. Mm-hmm. And in fact, sometimes they are so unhelpful that you go down some sort of path in life that then makes you feel stuck. And this is when the patterns emerge, especially the unhelpful patterns.
Okay.
Yeah.
So much of what drives us in our relationship lives, I mean, obviously all of our lives, but just for our conversation today, especially our intimate relationships, are these subconscious drivers that we're not even aware of.
Absolutely. And because it happens so quickly, I mean, with these assumptions and thoughts that we have, they are activated so quickly that we are not even necessarily aware of them. We have to slow that down. That's what we do in therapy. That's what we do. And so what we're going to go on to today about the 5 steps to free yourself from unhelpful dating patterns. It's about slowing that process down and tapping into what is actually going on. What are those thoughts and triggers that are being activated in a particular scenario. And once you can tap into that, then you can change.
Okay, wonderful. Well,
Mhm.
it's taking that step to be
Mm.
becoming consciously aware of
Mhm.
what's going on for you.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you just led us very nicely into into the next bit. Thank you very much. So, the process that you're going to talk us through, we're going to talk about 5 steps that
Mhm.
we can use to free ourselves from unhelpful dating patterns. But
Yeah.
is this a process that we can use across the board for
Oh,
any kind of?
absolutely.
Okay,
Mhm.
so please
Yeah.
tell us a little bit more about that, and then we can go into the 5 steps.
Okay. Well, the idea is pretty simple. Like I said, it's about stopping the thought process or slowing it down and looking at it um, from a sort of sort of a mindful perspective, if that makes sense. So we're trying to learn something about ourselves, not being judgmental about it, and it's about. So we're going back to the Johari's window. It's about trying to create more self-awareness, and the more self-aware that you are around your circumstances and your behaviors, then you're in a better position to change that if you want to. This is all about what you're motivated to do. It can be a pretty scary journey because sometimes there's some truths there that you're not really ready to handle.
Sure.
So, especially if a lot of the stuff is driven by fear of commitment, fear of not being good enough, fear of rejection, fear of judgment. There's a lot of fear there, and to want to sit down and change these patterns, I think you have to be quite brave, actually, because you don't really know what's going to come up for you. But you can use it across the board for sure. I mean, any pattern, anything that feels sticky in your life, that's you're just not quite getting what you want to do. There is an element of, well, maybe there's something you can do about it, and this is one way to find out.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, so if you can talk us through the next 5 steps, then please, Madeleine.
Okay,
fabulous.
right.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, as I'm talking, if any, for the listeners, you could say, great, get a bit of paper out and do it as we talk.
Great idea. Thank you.
Yeah. So those 5 steps, and to slow the process down, you require to sort of write it on a bit of paper. That helps slow down the process, and it also helps bring out some things that are perhaps a little bit more deeper in your unconsciousness, or at least further away from your awareness. So the first thing that you'd want to do is write down as many things you dislike about dating as you can. Think of all of the frustrations, all of the annoyances that you might have, and list them. Simply just write a long list of things. It could be, I have to meet loads of people. I hate meeting loads of people. And everybody I meet have a fear of commitment, or they never respond to my messages. I can never get a first date. I'm really annoyed that whatever it might be. So all the annoyances and all the frustrations that you have with dating. So once you've written those down, then you want to rank them in order of annoyance. So which one is the most annoying? Rank as number 1, and then you go down.
Okay.
So this can as you rank them, you can then sort of sort out for yourself, well, actually, which one of these is the most important for me? Which one is the most irritating sticking point? And as you've written all of the different things down, you might find it wasn't actually the first one that you found was the most annoying, but maybe the 5th thing that you wrote down that's the most annoying.
Okay.
The idea is to at least pick the one that you find most annoying. So once you've done that, the next step is to write down the reasons why you might be experiencing that particular annoyance.
Okay.
So people are never responding to my messages, for example. Let's say that's my number 1 annoyance about dating. Then it's take a few minutes to think about what might the reasons be that you might be experiencing people not responding. And you can start with something that's pretty obvious. They don't get my message, or they're busy. I'm not writing in the right way. My profile might be incorrect or wrong, or attracting the wrong sort of people. So list again as many of those things that might be the reason for why you're experiencing your particular annoyance. So let's say you have about 5 different things that that might be the reason. And this is not about judging whether you've done something right or wrong, or blaming other people. This is just about sort of practical, almost at a practical level. Let's look at this on a, like a surgical table. Let's have a look. Let's dissect this a bit. What sort of objective reasons could there be?
Okay. So it's kind of almost emotionally detaching from the possibilities. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't want to worry about why somebody might, I'm feeling hurt, or this is outrageous, whatever the emotion might be, but just simply what could it be? What are the factors that lead up to you experiencing, in this case, people never responding to messages?
Okay.
Once you have done that, you'll have a list, say 5 things. And the next step then is to go through each reason and see what you can do differently about each one, if you can. So say people don't get my messages. Well, you could check up on that. Well, on my particular dating app, I can see people have read it. Okay, so that's nothing I can do much about. Go on to the next one. Is on my messages, what I'm writing, is could there be something wrong with that? What can I change about it? And slowly you'll find that you are problem solving, essentially. You've got this issue, and you're coming up with little ideas about how to solve each of those things. And sort of give yourself time to mull over it. This is just it's okay to kind of to go there, if that makes sense. Then imagine what you'd need to do in order to change it. Because some of the things you might need to change your profile, you might need to change your photos, and some of that might bring up some discomfort for you.
Okay.
So the last step is then to write an action plan. Now that I've got these sort of solutions to each of the little problems that might lead to my annoyance and frustration, what things am I going to do, and when am I going to do them? So then you create a little action plan and then change. That's probably the most difficult part of the whole thing. But at least you've got some things to work with in terms of, right, now how can I change? What am I going to implement?
Okay.
And then it's rinse and repeat, really, because now you've got another annoyance, right, on your ranking from point 2. You might have a different one. So what's going on there? I can never get second dates, and that's really annoying. So, and then you do the process again.
Okay. All right. So in terms of getting into these habits or patterns, how do you translate that, how can I say this? When you're in that situation, when you talk about an annoyance, what's the connection between that annoyance or a habit, or how does an annoyance become a habit, or how does that all work together?
So let's say the sticking point is I can never get a date. Then you might have a series of thoughts evolved around that. So the annoyance is your interpretation of not getting first dates. You could not care. Well, I couldn't, it's not, there's something wrong with the world. Or you could care. But you're seeing it as a form of rejection, or you're seeing it as a form of frustration because you want a first date in order to whatever, So it's your interpretation of the situation that will inform you whether you find that annoying or not. Okay.
And is it then when we kind of repeat that thinking that we get into a habit or a pattern, or
well, the pattern comes from doing the same thing over and over and not getting a different result, essentially.
Okay.
So let's say normally patterns will arise from once upon a time this worked, or I have this idea that this worked, or I've read somewhere that if I do this then this will work, and you somehow repeat that.
Okay. All right. So let's think about this. We need to become consciously aware of something, obviously, before we can change it. And this part of the work is getting into the bit that we are not always consciously aware of, and other people are also not aware of. So the fourth window, shall I say? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, this seems to really tap into something that I feel very strongly about, which is taking responsibility for your role in what's happening to you, and the questions around what am I doing to cause this or contribute to this situation. Do you have any thoughts around that sort of accountability and responsibility?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I completely agree. I think that we can take more responsibility and do more things than we think we might be able to do. But it can be really difficult to do it on your own. Self-help books can get you so far. Self-help steps can get you so far. And I think coaching kind of gives you one up on that, because then we're in a space where there's another pair of eyes, if you like, that are looking onto the window where nobody knows anything, or you don't know, the client doesn't know anything, and the outside world doesn't know anything. And one way of getting to that space is by looking at the different behaviors that we experience, the different experiences that manifest themselves in a particular pattern, and that particular pattern then being unhelpful. So you're sort of almost working backwards. You're sort of saying, well, there's a series of behaviors, and they will inform me of something that's underlying, that's sort of unconscious, that's really difficult to get hold of because it operates at such a fast level. Call them automatic thoughts in CBT. And once you can tap into those, then you start understanding what's going on. So that's sort of the process, really. It's kind of like a funnel.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
well,
so to the degree that you can understand, you can see that pattern, then you work backwards, if that makes sense. But in order to want to do that, you'd have to have a certain level of motivation to want to change it, because that in itself can be difficult. The change in itself requires effort, and sometimes that effort can be uncomfortable.
Sure. Yeah. And that's our role as coaches, isn't
Correct.
it? To hold that, shall I say?
Yeah, absolutely.
I so agree, because I just think there's just so much advice and tips and strategies and all sorts of things out there, but unless you actually really, really connected to you as an individual and your deepest experiences, and having somebody to kind of walk through that with you, it's very hard to actually make sense of it all, and it's all just really, it stays on a very superficial level, doesn't it? Yeah.
And also when you talk about deeper connections, so for example, I had a client the other day who had been on a few first dates with some people, as it was described, were atrocious. The behavior was terrible from the dates part, I thought. And my client was unsure of whether they were reading the situation correctly or not. And just being able to talk in a non-judgmental space about this is what's happened, and then get a confirmation that, listen, that there's something completely wrong with those dates. It's not you per se. However, the pattern is that you're attracting them. So what's going on there? So there's almost differentiating between what's going on for you. Yes, you are experiencing, this is a pattern you are experiencing. Yes, you are right to notice that these dates are bad for you. So things like, I don't know what they said, the content with which they were saying different things or not, whatever. I don't need to go into the detail of it, but the point is that you're able to separate the emotional content from it and look at what's going on, and then create another space with which you can then do some change.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So there's quite a lot to this, isn't there?
Yeah.
Okay. And as you say, I think it is a really brave thing to take that step and actually contact somebody and sit down with somebody and say, listen, I want to do something about this. So I totally agree with you. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Madeleine. That's really helpful and really practical. And I'll make sure that we put out the steps and so on and everything that we talked about on our individual podcast page on the website.
Okay.
So just tell us a little bit more about PassionSmiths and how people can connect with you and how you can support them.
Yeah, so PassionSmiths was founded 3 years ago with my co-founder Daniel, who's a psychotherapist. There's 3 of us on board, and we're getting a 4th person on board, a clinical psychologist, so which we're really excited about. We offer one-to-one coaching sessions predominantly in person in London, but we can also do Skype. And like we mentioned earlier, there's relationship counselling as well. We do. Sometimes people will want to kind of check out and see whether we actually can help them in the way that they think. Because it's, again, like we were talking about earlier, it's really can be quite a scary endeavor to go to an expert or a psychologist or psychotherapist. And so we offer sort of a 10-minute free consultation just to put people at ease and let them know how we can help them best, and also to provide the right person. So we at PassionSmiths, we have different skill sets and different demographics, and somebody might be better suited to see Daniel or Christine or to see me. So we kind of make sure that we get the best person for the best for the client's needs.
That personal connection is really, really important, isn't
absolutely
it?
Absolutely. If you don't have the personal connection, if you don't have that trust, then it's very difficult to move forward in any therapeutic relationship.
This is, I think, especially when it comes to this, is such an intimate journey, really.
Absolutely. Another thing that's really important for us is that we operate from a value that we're all humans. So we don't do this divide that men are from Mars and women are from Venus, for example. There's not, pain, rejection, fear, all of it happens regardless of gender. You can be worried regardless of whether you're a man or a woman. So we kind of try not to do this sort of women are in this particular way and men are in this particular way. We try and get even deeper to that. We get to the human level. What's going on at the human level?
Okay. Well, thank you. That's so. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, check out PassionSmiths website, which is PassionSmiths.com.
Yep.
And we will include the link as well on the podcast page.
Yep.
So
there is a form on there that people can just put their details on, and then we'll get in touch.
Okay. All right. So that's also another way. So, Madeleine, since we're talking love and dating and relationships, I always like to ask my guests about their definition of love. Can you share yours with us?
So my definition of love is that it's ecstasy for the soul.
That's so beautiful. It's the shortest one I've ever heard, I have to say, but it is beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Right. So before we finish off, from your point of view, if you could give me and our listeners your top piece of relationship advice, what would you say that is?
I would say always challenge your assumptions and embrace your fears. It's a difficult one, but I think that's the one that will give you the most value on your journey to finding love, finding a relationship, because we operate a lot of times out of fear. So I don't know if you saw one of my latest blogs about, as an example of somebody was spitting out a pip of an olive, and the date then decided the date decided I'm not going to date this person at all, and you're just sitting there thinking, what you this is tiny action that's ruined the potential of a whole relationship. What's going on there? What's the assumption that's driving that?
Very good. So definitely something easier said than done, but the payoff at the end could be more than you can imagine. Absolutely. So just say that again for us, please.
So always challenge your assumptions. So you'll have an assumption about somebody. You'll see somebody, say, and you'll make a quick snap judgment about them. Suspend those judgments as much as you can and check whether they're actually true. So you see somebody with glasses, for example. I'm not going to date anybody with glasses, you might say, because, and you'll have an assumption. Suspend that assumption and find out whether it's really the case.
I love it. So you add the word because,
Mm-hmm.
and then your assumption will kind of reveal itself to you.
Exactly. I'll only date a 6'5" guy because, and then your assumption will come up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Excellent. I love that. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
That's really great. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Madeleine, for spending time with us today. I really appreciate it. And we wish you all the very best at PassionSmiths, and especially with your studies. Gosh.
Thank you. Yes, it's going to be very interesting.
Pretty huge.
More dating material to come.
Wonderful.
Okay.
So you also run workshops and events in London, right?
Yes, I do. So workshops, events are mostly sort of one-off types things, typically Valentine's, and that's simply because we know so many people and we think it's a great opportunity for other singles to meet. And the workshops and seminars, they vary. So we'll have topics typically once a month that will cover a dating issue that people find. And the workshops then are the sort of the next step, sort of a halfway house between a seminar and dating coaching. So we have workshops that go in depth. I mean, the next one we've got is in July, and this is about really getting to grips with patterns, actually. What's going on in our lives? How are we dating the way we're dating now? Why are we getting dating fatigue, and how do we overcome that? What can we do then going forward to change that? So that's actually a huge workshop around change.
So keep an eye on your website.
Yeah, definitely.
Gosh, you just said something very interesting around dating fatigue. Maybe that's a whole different episode.
Yeah, that's another episode for sure.
Okay, well, thank you, Madeleine.
All right, then, Annie. Thank you very much.
Just stay on the line, and I'm going to say goodbye. Okay. So this was the Ready for Love podcast with Auret, your host, and very special guest, Madeleine Mason. Thank you for joining us today. Remember, you can check out the show notes on my website, www.datingcoach.uk/podcast. And if you have any questions or comments for me, please do email me at anna@datingcoach.uk, or you can reach me on Twitter handle @datingcoach. So I wish you all the best for wherever you are and whatever you're busy with, and I can't wait to connect with you again next week. I hope that you'll come and join me. Sending you much love as always. Take care.